Hi, I'm Ellen, and I'll just introduce my research area. Within the framework of visual anthropology, I'm researching the impacts of digital death. And by that I mean the digital afterlife, what happens to our online traces, social media profiles after we pass away, and how the advent of social media has changed our relationship with death and grieving. Conducting anthropological research in this field online draws up a lot of new challenges, both to explore as a researcher and to reflect on methodologically. Such are omnipresent online traces, data storage, shifting presentations of the self, ethical algorithms, and the navigation of an online field site. This idea of an online field site ties into the permeance of technology, in that in traditional anthropology, one goes into the field and leaves again, and this is now no longer possible. Doing anthropology online leaves little space for logging out, and that can become a burden for the researcher too. Something which interrupted my line of research is how the current global coronavirus pandemic is exacerbating multiple underlying developments. One in particular is the amount of time we spend online. Whereas now this may have eased somewhat, certain places are still facing further lockdowns, and ultimately public service closures, restrictions on the amount of people gathering, and advice to stay at home is forcing people to find alternative means of entertainment, communication, and working. Online exercise classes are proliferating, and Zoom has become a household name, as those with internet access try to cling on to the normality of offline life online. I mean, we're even doing it here. We're adapting. It's weird, it's slow, and it's imperfect, but it's happening. And as our lives play out increasingly online, so too does the inevitable accompaniment to our existence, and that's death. In dealing with rising mortality numbers and bans on public events, funeral homes are offering the opportunity to have a live streaming service, so you can now watch your loved one's funerals from the comfort of your sofa. Death and grieving are moving online now more than ever. This was something I also unexpectedly had to deal with in May, attending a funeral in London via a live stream where I was in Switzerland, while staying at an artist residency. And it's thrown my research down a neighbouring rabbit hole. These images here are of my partner and I tuning in, and unfortunately it didn't stream well. The service was largely interrupted and we mostly watched this circle buffering. I'll play a short clip of a film I'm in the process of putting together about people's experiences with online funerals. And at the moment I've just collated my own experience and one other's, and the clip is a very in progress part, so yeah. Is it moving? Or is there no one there? I think it's frozen.
Maybe recharge.
Oh look. Oh. What's that, man?
Sanitizer gun.
Okay.
Sanitizer.
Oh no, did I do it with Google Chrome?
Maybe try. This didn't restart.
Oh no.
It's the flower for
Oh my god.
why there's no quality, right? Do you have anything that's downloading or anything?
What else can I quit? Safari? Notes?
Can you try to charge my phone? Connections on the Wi-Fi.
I don't know, should I just pause it? Should I unplug my hard drive?
Thomas said, "Well, we do not know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus said, "I am the way."
think it's the computer game.
And people having to sort of do with streaming, but thank God for streaming. And thank God that some people will be able to see this service and join in by recording or by streaming. Before we go our separate ways, let us leave. Hear the prayers of the Redeemer Jesus Christ and the voices of your people. May our farewell whose lives were purchased by the blood of the Lamb.
Oh, what?
It's probably finished.
In my personal experience, the complete disconnect, physically and emotionally, from the real event became almost comedic. Of course, the service comes at an extra cost, and afterwards we were offered a video recording of the funeral, which raises additional questions of how to manage this data asset, its storage, its circulation, the possibilities of sharing this fairly private experience with a much larger audience. But then when would you normally have the opportunity to rewatch a funeral service? Death and grieving are moving online now more than ever. However, as I said, this is just exacerbating a situation that was already developing. It's become normal to announce the death on social media. It's often the first place people learn of such news, and #RIP tweets are regularly going viral as people put out tributes. The most liked tweet ever occurred recently, shown here, from the account of Chadwick Boseman, announcing his passing. And it wasn't just Twitter. Tributes to the late actor flooded across multiple platforms. Following the death of my father in 2015, I began conducting ethnographic research in the form of interviews with Facebook users in my network who had vocalized losses online. I must admit, at the time, I held a skeptical stance over publicizing a death or sharing a memory of someone who had passed away on Facebook. However, announcing a death was seldom a private affair. Yet unlike a printed obituary, which goes out once to a mass audience, close to the time of death, and with no real invitation for a response, such notifications of grief on social media are immediate and interactive, eliciting a different kind of interaction to one in the physical sense. Criticism, however, comes with the belief that people overshare online in ways they wouldn't face-to-face. I found that many Facebookers found comfort in announcing a death via the platform. The instantaneous nature of publicly expressing grief on social media paradoxically presents us as vulnerable to a wider audience, yet the technological distance somehow protectively shields us. This factor of distance is preferable over physical interactions because we have the ability to edit our content and present the self as we prefer to be seen. The benefits of such actions are the speed and immediacy of the scope in which we can interact, connect, share, and form a collective memory of a late individual. As researchers, it also invites questions as to how to analyze emoticons, shown here to express sentiments where perhaps words fail. Conclusions from the initial research I conducted into grief and social media revealed how humanity is constantly catching up with technology. Ultimately, we're now faced with the loss of a physical presence and an online presence, double the work. But how does this new online existence affect the traditional absence found after a death? Is it still possible to find that silence, that loss, or has it been compromised by the constant bombardment of online data and a lurking Facebook profile of the deceased? We might be catching up, but we're becoming increasingly entangled as we do so. As our time online increases, there's always a company at the other end ensuring our demands are met. Apps and platforms spring up out of nowhere, enticing us to create a profile and punch in our data so they can assist with our every developing need. But what does this mean for our mounting digital trace after death, especially with those platforms which are interactive? It's simply further complicating our relationship towards the online dead. Can we continue our bonds, an idea discussed by Bell et al., something which was built upon later by Vincent Desprez, around the notion of understanding the dead as people like everybody else? Or should we turn the other way, and erase their digital remains and let go completely? These messages, shown here with one user, Dominic, in which we discuss the passing of his dad, details how social media introduced a world of his dad's that he never really knew. To big social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, our profiles translate us into consumers. Oman and Watson's study predict that soon the number of dead profiles will outnumber the living on Facebook. Facebook relies on advertising to generate an income, but dead people aren't very useful consumers. They won't be clicking on those targeted ads. So who is going to pay for their upkeep? What happens to the feedback loop when it's the dead generating the data? And how do we as anthropologists navigate this collective history left behind by the online dead? As Mackenzie Walk writes in her book, Capital is Dead, Is This Something Worse? The dominant ruling class of our time owns and controls information. She terms this new controlling class as the vectoralist class. They are the ones profiting from our willing submission of information. Digital death is the ultimate clash of familiar human concepts of time with the ubiquitous computational time. This new emergence of immortal time challenges our conventions. The need to humanize algorithms is all the more vital now with sensitivities such as death. People you may know, friend suggestions or birthday reminders of the deceased aren't exactly perceptive, like this user said in the comment at the top. This user's experience reinforces our reliance on social media and technology in general. I too admit to remembering a birthday late just because Facebook told me so. This could be a form of automation bias, which with the advent of artificial intelligence raises worrying concerns. As James Bridle discusses, automation bias ensures that we value automated information more highly than our own experiences, even when it conflicts with other observations, particularly when those observations are ambiguous. Automated information is clear and direct and confounds the grey areas that muddle cognition. It's becoming optional for us to remember, and we are already becoming the automated bots, wishing a dead person happy birthday because they still exist on Facebook. We are making the mistakes algorithms come under criticism for. When I first began this research in 2016, none of my participants were aware of Facebook's memorialization of a profile, demonstrated here with Mark Zuckerberg, for a way to remember its deceased users without deleting their accounts. Facebook and Instagram offer possibilities for immortalization with a memorialized profile. Twitter only offers deactivation. Some of my participants don't like the idea of a Facebook profile remaining active after death, as it invites others to craft an identity of the deceased, for example by posting on the wall and potentially asserting an invented relationship to the individual, which then appears publicly visible online. But who, apart from close relations, can detect this and call this out? How could a researcher detect this online hijacking of the curatorship of the self? This complexity in how to manage digital assets after death allows for another form of capital to develop. Q companies offering to plan your own digital afterlife. For example, Eta9 uses artificial intelligence to analyze activity and learn how to post for you after death. These continuing bonds can essentially continue, allowing other users to interact with your online presence. Does the trace then become an active bot in the sense that it gains agencies? And are these companies' immortal promises really immortal? What are the ethical concerns of accessing a deceased user's account? Should it be up to the family, close family, or only allowed if the user expresses this wish before parting? This company, Safe Beyond, allows you to leave a message to your loved one who will receive it after you pass away. You can time it too. It's certainly weird, and it's not sure something I'd want to do, but others I've spoken to have mentioned it could be touching. My messages on the one hand won't be kept. I only signed up for the 30-day free trial, and I couldn't find information on the costs after this time period has expired. I'm waiting on that email still. The vast amounts of snippets of my research process are scattered across the internet, across multiple platforms, as I too use my accounts to connect with others. How do we manage this online trace, this online field site, if even I, as a conscious researcher, am losing track of my digital trace? The publicity of oversharing this kind of information is aided by the technological shield mentioned earlier. As I reflect on my position as a researcher, I'm wondering whether my own misfortune allows me access to these conversations. And I appreciated very quickly that just because such posts are publicly available online, it doesn't always mean the user wants them shared. Consent and privacy remain an integral part of the research process. Ultimately, we don't really know what to do. I don't have a solution for how to deal with an online death, and neither do most of the people I've spoken to. I have no idea what I want to happen to my own digital assets. From the research I've done thus far, I'll say that a large part of my personal motivation, and some of the others I've conversed with, is to encourage conversations about death, which from at least my background as someone brought up in the UK, is often regarded as a taboo. In terms of how this plays out online, perhaps I'm hoping that through this research it will assist people in acclimatizing to death online. The question of what to do with our digital assets, whether they should be written into wills, etc., is another rabbit hole. Thank you.